There are memories you think you've buried, memories you tell yourself were just dreams or exaggerations of a younger mind, but some of them don't stay buried. They linger in the corners of your thoughts, like a light you swear you turned off, but still see glowing faintly in the dark. For many people, high school was loud hallways, cafeteria lunches, and awkward conversations. But for others, it was the first place they learned that fear doesn't always live in haunted houses or abandoned asylums. Sometimes it sits across from you at lunch. Sometimes it walks behind you in an empty hallway. And sometimes it knows your name. You grow up thinking schools are safe. There are teachers, cameras, crowds of students everywhere. Yet no one talks about the things that happened when the lights flickered off, when the last bus left the parking lot, when the janitor locked the main doors and the building went silent. No one tells you how it feels to walk past a row of lockers and suddenly realize you're not alone even though you were sure you were, or how the air feels heavier when you know someone is staring at you, but you don't know from where. These stories rarely end up in police reports. They don't make the morning announcements. They live in whispers, in diary pages ripped out long ago, in the kind of silence people carry for years. Maybe it happened in your school. Maybe it happened to someone you sat next to in math class. And maybe they never told anyone. Because who would believe that two smiling students could drag you into the woods behind a cemetery? Or that a trusted teacher could make the lights go out in a locker room on purpose? Who would believe that someone could stand completely still in the dark, breathing beside you, waiting for you to notice them? These things did happen. Not in horror movies, not in ghost stories, but to real people who thought they were safe. Some of them are fine now. They graduated, moved away, built new lives. But ask them if they still sleep with their door locked. Ask them if they still double-check their window before bed. You might notice a pause before they answer. Tonight, you're going to hear some of those stories. You don't have to believe them. But if you've ever walked through your old school at night in your mind, tracing every shadowed hallway, wondering what might still be hiding there, then a part of you already does. I was the new kid at Southern Lehigh High School. Dropped into a place where everyone already had their tables in the cafeteria, their inside jokes, their history. I didn't know where to sit or who to talk to, and lunch was the worst part of the day because unlike seniors, juniors weren't allowed to leave campus. I remember standing there holding my tray, scanning every table that was already filled, until I saw one in the far corner with only two guys sitting there, twins. They looked at me when I approached. One nodded, and I sat down. They introduced themselves as Antonio and Bruno. Same face, same calm stare, same unsettling way of watching people. But they were nice enough at first. They asked where I came from, told me about the football games on Friday nights, and even asked if I wanted to hang out after school. I didn't have friends yet, so I said yes. After I went home that afternoon, one of them, Bruno, texted me. He said they liked me and that they were going to hang out at the spot near the cemetery around 9 p.m. I hesitated when I read the word cemetery, but he said it was just a chill place by a little lake in the woods. It was a Friday. We had no school the next day, and I told myself I was just being paranoid. So at around 8:50 p.m., I put on a hoodie, texted him I was leaving, and walked toward the cemetery. The deeper I went into the night, the clearer it became how quiet the neighborhood really was. No cars, no dogs barking, only the crunch of gravel under my shoes. When I got near the cemetery road, I texted Bruno asking where they were. He replied almost instantly, "In the woods, just follow the path by the fence. You'll see the trees open up near the lake." He dropped his location pin, and I followed the dim glow of my phone deeper into the trees. My flashlight wasn't doing much, just a tiny beam of light in this thick darkness that smelled like wet dirt and moss. I started calling their names softly. Bruno? Antonio? No answer. But then, leaves crunched behind me. At first, slow, like someone trying to sneak up. I laughed nervously and said, "Okay, don't try to scare me." Silence. Then footsteps again, but faster, heavier. Before I could turn, something hooked around my neck, nails digging into my skin, pressing against my throat. I gasped and heard Bruno's voice somewhere behind me shouting, "Grab him!" I ripped myself free and bolted. Branches snapped behind me. Someone tripped. Someone growled in frustration. I ran so hard I could barely breathe, and I didn't stop until the trees thinned and I reached the road. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see their faces. I just ran home and slammed the door behind me. My parents were stunned when they saw the red marks on my neck. They wanted to call the police right away, but I asked them to wait so I could show the school first with proof, Bruno's texts, the location pin, everything. The next day, the principal and police were already involved. The twins were expelled within a week. Their parents were furious, but the school board stood by the decision. My parents made me block both of their numbers, and I did. I thought it was over. For a few days, I avoided windows at night. I slept with my door locked, but then everything went quiet again, and school life became routine. A week later, I woke up shivering. My room was freezing. My window, locked before I went to bed, was open all the way up. The night air drifted in, and below the window was the little ledge my dad once said I should use in case of a fire. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I went to my parents' room and whispered, "Did either of you open my window?" My mom squinted at me, confused. She said no. My dad mumbled for me to go back to sleep. I walked back down the hallway. Something didn't feel right. When I left my room, my door had been all the way open, but now it was halfway closed. I pushed it slowly, creating just a crack so I could peek inside. I don't know why I did it. Part of me already knew. In the darkness, behind the door, someone was standing, just standing there. My voice broke into a scream that didn't even sound human. My dad shot down the hallway, slammed the door open, and flicked the light on. We saw a leg, someone's leg, vanishing out the window. My dad ran to the ledge, then downstairs out the front door. He came back minutes later, breathless, shaking his head. The police arrived. They asked questions, looked around, but we all knew who it was. Antonio, Bruno, or both. They didn't catch them. There were no fingerprints, no footprints on the grass, nothing they could use. All they said was, "Keep the doors locked. Consider installing cameras." For months after that, I slept with the lights on. Every sound, the house settling, the wind against the siding. A distant passing car felt like footsteps. No one ever came back. Or maybe they did. I just never woke up in time to catch them again. And even now, years later, when I think back to that cafeteria on my first day, the twins sitting alone in the corner, smiling like they were waiting for someone, I wonder if they had already chosen me before I even opened my mouth to ask, "Can I sit here?" Freshman year of high school, last period of the day. The sky outside looked like it could collapse under the weight of the storm clouds hanging over the gymnasium roof. We had a substitute teacher that day, an older man with graying hair. Not quite elderly, but old enough that his quiet voice carried a kind of authority that made everyone listen. He took attendance slowly, scanning each face like he wanted to memorize it. When his eyes met mine, he paused for a second too long, then marked the clipboard without a word. I brushed it off. I always looked older than I was, more mature than a typical freshman, and I was used to people staring for a moment before looking away. After attendance, he told us to get into volleyball teams, then disappeared into the hallway by the locker rooms. For the rest of class, he didn't return. Nobody thought much of it. It was storming outside. The gym lights flickered every now and then, and everyone was just waiting for the bell to ring so they could go home. When class ended, I went to the girls' locker room to change and go catch my bus. I spun the lock on my locker, but it wouldn't open. I tried again, slower, pressing my ear to the cold metal like I could hear the click of the tumblers. Still nothing. I must have tried it 5 more times before finally giving up and wrapping my arms around myself against the chill spreading across my damp gym uniform. I walked out to where the substitute was sitting at a small desk, scribbling something in a notebook. I told him my locker wasn't opening and asked if he had the combinations list. He smiled, said he'd get it, and told me to wait. A few minutes later, he came back holding a worn binder, flipped to a specific page, motioned for me to follow him, and walked with me into the girls' locker room. That alone made my stomach twist. Substitutes never walked into the locker rooms, not without another staff member, not without knocking, but There was no one else around anymore. Only one girl was still there, tying her shoes, earbuds in her ears. She glanced at us, confused, then left a second later as we reached my locker. The substitute read the combination from the paper, tried it once. Nothing. He laughed softly, like it was an inside joke between us. He tried again, slower. Nothing. His laugh was deeper this time, like he found something amusing I didn't understand. I forced a smile, pretending it didn't bother me. He placed his hand on my shoulder after the third attempt, fingers pressing lightly, the kind of touch that should have felt reassuring but didn't. He tried the combination again while his hand stayed there a moment too long. Then it began to move slowly, almost casually, down my back. I stepped away, pretending I didn't notice, saying, "It's okay, I can just go. I'll miss my bus." He didn't respond, just turned the lock one more time. It clicked open with a soft clank, and he smiled. I muttered a quiet thanks and waited as he walked out of the locker room. I didn't hear the main door shut behind him. I told myself I was imagining things. I opened my locker, grabbed my backpack, started to change, and then the lights went out. Not flickered, fully blacked out. The hum of the fluorescent bulbs vanished, and all I could hear was the storm outside, rain hammering the pavement. I whispered, "Hello?" No answer. I rushed, pulling on my jeans in the dark, hands shaking. My heart hammered so loud I could hear it in my ears. I grabbed my bag and headed to the exit in the back of the locker room, the one that led outside near the football field. But before I turned down the last row of lockers, something made me stop. I don't know why I didn't hear anything, didn't see anything. I just felt it, the way the air shifts when someone is watching you. I forced myself to look to the right. The only light in the entire room came from a small rectangular window near the ceiling. It was barely enough to see shapes, and in that faint blue-gray light, I saw him, the substitute, standing still, half hidden behind the lockers, his face just barely visible in the gloom, watching me, not moving, not speaking, just staring. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I just turned and ran. I heard him say, "Wait, it's not what you think," but his voice sounded too close, too calm. I ran through the exit door and into the rain, the cold air burning my skin. I didn't stop until I was off school grounds, soaking wet, shoes slapping against the sidewalk. I didn't tell anyone, not my friends, not my parents. I was ashamed, scared no one would believe me. I convinced myself that maybe I had misunderstood, that maybe the lights went off because of the storm, that maybe his expression wasn't what I thought I saw. But deep down, I knew he had changed my locker combination. He wanted me alone in that room, and when the lights went off, he wasn't surprised. He was waiting. I still don't know what would have happened if I hadn't looked, if I hadn't seen him standing there in the dark. Sometimes when the power goes out during a storm, I still get that feeling, the one where the room is too quiet, the shadows too deep, and I swear, even in an empty room, that someone is standing just out of sight, waiting for me to notice them. Back in high school, I wasn't the type of kid who got into trouble or skipped classes. I was quiet, kept to myself, and spent most of my free time in the band room. Our music teacher, Mr. Nicholson, had this rule. As long as you showed up to rehearsals, attended your weekly lessons, and didn't break anything, you'd get an A. Simple. But toward the end of one quarter, I was missing 2 lessons, which meant I was about to drop down to a B. I asked him if I could make them up, and even though he seemed reluctant at first, he told me I could come during my lunch period the next day and practice in one of the small storage rooms in the basement level of the music department. That basement wasn't like the rest of the school. It was older, quieter, and always cold. The walls were lined with rooms the size of closets, some empty, some filled with music stands and folding chairs stacked like bones. No windows, no teachers, just silence that made you feel like you shouldn't be there. The next day, I headed down during lunch with my saxophone case in one hand and my phone in the other. The light bulbs down there flickered like they were struggling to stay alive. I chose an empty storage room, shut the door behind me, and set my instrument down. I placed some sheet music on the stand in case Mr. Nicholson decided to check on me, but I didn't plan to play. I planned to sit, relax, maybe play games on my phone until the period ended. 10 minutes passed, maybe 15. Then suddenly everything went black. It was like someone had pulled a blanket over my head. The lights didn't flicker out. Gradually, they just died. The air felt heavier. I reached for the light switch, flicking it up and down, but nothing happened. My phone screen became the only light in that small, suffocating room. The hallway outside was even darker. My heart was beating too fast for how quiet everything was. I stood still, barely breathing. Then I heard it. Something scraping softly against the floor, like plastic being dragged, slow and uneven, coming from the far end of the hallway. I turned off my phone screen instantly. The darkness became absolute. My ears strained to follow the sound, drag, pause, drag, a breath, like someone struggling to pull something heavy. Then, a low, animal-like grunt, too deep to be human. I stayed frozen for what felt like forever. Eventually, I told myself it had to be a janitor or a teacher moving equipment. I took a step toward the door, planning to slip past quietly and make my way to the stairs. I cracked the door open, my phone clutched tightly in my hand, ready to use it as a flashlight if I had to run. The hallway was a shadow stretching in both directions. I didn't see anyone. I didn't hear anything. I took a step out, then another. The stairs were maybe 20 feet away. If I could reach them, I'd be fine. That's when I heard it again. A dragging sound closer this time, and a breath. Long, shaky. I panicked and ducked into the nearest open storage room, closing the door slowly, gently so it wouldn't click. I stood with my back pressed against the wall, trying not to breathe too loudly. The darkness felt thicker in there. That's when I realized something terrifying. I could sense someone else in the room with me. I don't know how to explain it. It was like the air shifted, like something was consuming the space around me. My hand trembled as I pressed my thumb on my phone's screen just long enough to turn it on for half a second. Half a second was enough. In the pale blue glow of my screen, I saw him, a man, standing in the corner, his head tilted slightly, his eyes reflecting the faint light, his chest rising and falling too fast, like he had been there the entire time, watching me. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My throat locked up. I reached for the doorknob, fingers slipping against the metal. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He was just there, breathing. I yanked the door open and ran. I didn't look back. I just sprinted up the stairs, my shoes slipping on the concrete steps. When I burst into the music room upstairs, the lights were on like nothing had happened. My heart was slamming against my ribs. Mr. Nicholson asked what was wrong, but I couldn't talk. I just pointed downstairs. He called school security. They searched the basement. They found nothing. No man, no equipment moved. Just a few chairs misplaced and some plastic storage bins left in the hallway. They told me maybe the power outage scared me and my mind filled in the rest. But I know what I saw. The way he stood there. The way he breathed. Like he wasn't surprised I had found him. Like he was waiting for me to move first. After that day, I never went back to the basement alone. Sometimes during storms, when the lights flicker in my house, I remember that room, the door slightly open, the darkness breathing beside me, and the awful realization that I wasn't alone long before I ever turned the light on. It was supposed to be a stupid adventure, the kind of thing you do with your friends just to prove you're not scared. It was late on a Friday night when my friends and I decided to sneak into our high school. Not through the front doors or by breaking locks, but through this basement window that had been cracked for years and never properly fixed. You had to hop over a waist-high metal gate surrounding the outside stairwell, then crawl through a narrow window that scraped your back if you weren't careful. It made you feel like you were doing something dangerous, even though the school itself was completely silent. The air inside was colder than outside, smelling like dust, floor wax, and something else. Something stagnant, like the air hadn't moved there in decades. We split up like idiots, laughing and whispering about who would find the principal's office first or who could make it to the gym without chickening out. I followed one of my friends, Brandon at least. I thought it was him. He was walking just ahead of me, shoulders slightly hunched, and every now and then he'd turn around and whisper, "Come on, hurry up." We made it to the main hallway, and that's when I realized something that still chills me. There were no lights on anywhere. Not the emergency lights, not the hallway lamps. Nothing. The only things glowing were the red exit signs, scattered like floating eyes in the dark. Everything else was swallowed in black. I whispered, "Dude, this is creepy," and he answered in a low voice, "I know, just follow me." I didn't question it. I should have. He led me to the boys' bathroom near the science wing and walked into one of the stalls. I stood outside, arms crossed, tapping my foot nervously. "Hurry up," I whispered. There was no response, just the dripping sound of a sink faucet somewhere in the corner. Then my phone started buzzing in my pocket. I answered without checking who it was. It was Chris. His voice came through the speaker in a hushed, panicked whisper. "Where the hell did you go? You were right behind us, then you disappeared." My heart skipped. I said, "I'm upstairs with Brandon, I think." There was a pause. Then Chris said, "Brandon's here with me. So is Roland." And then I heard both their voices in the background saying, "Yeah, we're all here." I felt my stomach drop. The stall door behind me creaked. Slowly, I turned my head and looked up toward the small gap above the stall door. Someone was standing on the toilet inside, peering over the door at me. He wasn't moving, just watching, his face barely visible. But I knew it wasn't Brandon. The eyes were wrong. Too wide, too still. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My body reacted before my brain did. I ran. I don't even remember leaving the bathroom. I just remember the sound of the stall door slamming open behind me, footsteps rushing out. I sprinted down the hallway, past the lockers, past the dark classroom doors, searching for the stairwell to the basement. Everything looked different in the dark. Every shadow looked like it could step forward and grab me. Somehow, I found the basement staircase and stumbled down, nearly falling. I shouted their names. "Chris! Roland! Go!" My voice cracked on the last word. I could hear my friends answering from somewhere below, their voices echoing off concrete walls. We ran, one by one, climbing onto a bucket beneath the broken window, shoving ourselves through the narrow gap. I was first out. I didn't look back to see if anyone was following. I just ran into the cold night air, lungs burning. When all four of us were finally outside, we stood there, panting, laughing a little, but not because it was funny. It was the kind of laugh people make when they're lucky to be alive. Then Chris pointed to one of the basement windows. "Guys," he whispered. We turned. In the dim light from outside, through the glass, we saw someone standing inside the school, their silhouette pressed close to the window, hands flat against the glass. You couldn't see the whole face, just part of it, an eye, a cheekbone, the edge of a mouth, watching us. No movement, no sound. That was the moment it hit us. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't another student hiding. Whoever it was, they hadn't come there with us. They were already inside. We ran. None of us talked about it for weeks. And when we finally did, no one had an explanation that made sense. No homeless person could have known their names, mimicked their voices, or stood silently in the dark bathroom waiting to be discovered. No security officer would hide in a stall, watching from above. Sometimes at night, I imagine being back in that bathroom, the silence heavy, the shadows darker than they should be, and I wonder if I had opened that stall door instead of running, would I have seen a face I recognized? Or something I wouldn't have survived seeing at all? Maybe you'll hear these stories and think they're exaggerated, or that fear warped the truth over time. And maybe you're right. Memory is a fragile thing. It bends, it blurs, it protects us from remembering details our minds aren't built to handle. But every person who lived through these moments still has one thing in common. There's a night they don't talk about, a hallway they won't walk down alone, a window they always double check before going to sleep. These aren't ghost stories. No doors slammed by invisible spirits. No whispered voices coming from the attic. What makes them terrifying is that every shadow had fingerprints. Every noise belonged to something breathing. Every face was human. And somehow, that makes it worse. Because how do you protect yourself from something that smiles at you in daylight, eats lunch across from you, or grades your homework? How do you prove that someone stood in your room at 3 a.m.? When your parents check every corner and find nothing but cold air and a half-open window? People love to tell you that high school is the best time of your life. They talk about football games, first loves, prom nights. They don't talk about the students who sit alone in the cafeteria scanning every face, hoping to find someone safe to sit with. They don't talk about teachers whose eyes linger too long. They don't talk about the nights when the school should be silent, but isn't. If you're lucky, you'll never understand that kind of fear. The kind that settles in your bones and stays there long after graduation. But if you do, if you've ever locked your bedroom door and still slept facing it, just in case, then maybe you already know. The world doesn't always need ghosts to be haunted. So tonight, when you turn off the lights, notice the way the floor creaks when the house settles. Notice the thin draft coming from the crack of your window. Notice how your reflection in the dark glass looks almost like you, except the eyes stay looking at you even after you turn away. And if for just 1 second you feel like someone else is in the room, don't ignore it. Fear is a warning, not a weakness. But if you're brave enough to keep listening, to hear the quiet truth most people refuse to say out loud, then remember this: the scariest stories aren't the ones filled with monsters. They're the ones that end with a locked door, a dark room, and the quiet hope that whatever was there the night before doesn't come back. Sleep well, and if you can, at least now you know you're not alone.